My name is Julian Croft. I suppose at 34, a man should have a more complex introduction, but for most of my life, my identity felt like a quiet, secondary thing, a footnote in someone else's story. I work as a digital archivist for the Port Blossom Historical Society, a job that suits me. I spend my days in the hushed, climate-controlled quiet of the archives, restoring faded photographs and digitizing brittle documents. I find a deep sense of peace in it, in taking things that are fractured and forgotten and making them whole and permanent again. It is a slow, meticulous, and lonely craft. For 13 years, my life mirrored my work. I was saving carefully and quietly for a sanctuary of my own. I wasn't trying to build an empire, I just wanted a foundation. A small plot of earth, a roof that didn't leak, a front door with a lock that only I had the key to. A place of stillness. My parents, on the other hand, are not people who appreciate stillness. They thrive in drama, in grand gestures and loud declarations. Which is why, I suppose, I should not have been surprised when, after 13 years of grinding and saving every spare dollar, my reward for finally buying my first home was not a housewarming gift, but a court summons. My own parents took me to court for buying a house, claiming I owed them $400,000. Before I tell you how a secret recording I made in my own living room unraveled their entire narrative in front of a judge, I need to take you back. Not just to the beginning of the lawsuit, but to the beginning of the story they had been writing for me my entire life. 2 months before the world tilted on its axis, I stood on the porch of a small, cedar-shingled cottage on a street lined with old maple trees. The air smelled of salt from the nearby bay and the sweet, damp scent of moss. The realtor, a kind woman with a warm smile, placed a set of brass keys into my palm. They felt impossibly heavy, a weight of years and sacrifices. I had done it. Every double shift at the waterfront diner in my college years, every holiday spent working instead of celebrating, every rusty, second-hand car I'd nursed back to life, every packed lunch, every lonely evening spent poring over my own meager budget. It had all led to this. I walked through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing on the bare hardwood floors. The smell of fresh, eggshell-white paint filled my lungs, and it was the smell of a new beginning, of a story I could finally write for myself. It was the proudest, most profound moment of my life. That feeling of profound peace lasted for exactly 53 hours. Then, the certified letter arrived. It sat on the polished surface of the new kitchen counter, stark and official against the warm butcher block I'd been so excited about. I slid it open, my brow furrowed with mild curiosity. Inside, the paper was thick and creamy, embossed with the name of a law firm I'd never heard of. My eyes scanned the legalese, tripping over phrases like plaintiff and defendant. Then I saw the names. Plaintiff, Richard and Helen Croft. My father and my mother. Defendant, Julian Croft. Me. The air left my body in a sudden, sharp gasp. It had to be a mistake, a grotesque, cruel joke. But as my eyes raced down the page, the words swam into a sickening reality. They were suing me. They were suing me for the cost of my own upbringing, itemized and calculated down to the last dollar, a debt they had unilaterally decided I owed. And the total, the number that seemed to scream from the page, was $400,000. They were demanding that the deed to my new home be signed over to my brother, Simon, as a down payment on this fictitious debt. The brass keys in my pocket, once a symbol of freedom, now felt like shackles. I slid down the kitchen cabinets until I was sitting on the floor, the legal papers scattered around me like fallen leaves. The smell of new paint was no longer the smell of a new beginning. It was the smell of a carefully laid trap closing in. I stared at the number again, that impossible, absurd figure. It wasn't just a number. It was a price tag they had placed on my 13 years of effort, a bill for their conditional love. And as I sat there, a single, cold question echoed in the silent, sunlit house. Why? To understand the why, you have to understand the ecosystem of my family. It was a simple, brutal planetary system. My younger brother, Simon, was the sun. He was brilliant, dazzling, and everything revolved around him. I was a distant, shadowy moon, useful mostly for reflecting his light back at him, making him seem even brighter. Everything came easily to Simon because everything was given to him. I remember my 16th birthday with a crystalline clarity. My gift from our parents was a stern lecture on the importance of fiscal responsibility and the expectation that I would get a job immediately to pay for my own car insurance. I started washing dishes at a greasy spoon that weekend. For Simon's 16th birthday, 2 years later, a brand new silver coupe was parked in the driveway, adorned with a ridiculously large red bow. My parents stood on either side of it, their faces aglow with a kind of fierce, possessive pride I had never seen directed at me. "A young man of his potential needs a reliable vehicle," my father announced to the gathered relatives. I stood at the back of the crowd, the faint, sour smell of dishwater still clinging to my shirt, feeling as though I were watching a movie about a family I didn't quite belong to. A few years later, I was slogging my way through Port Blossom Community College, paying for every credit myself with money earned from a grueling schedule. Class from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m., working as a porter at a downtown hotel from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m., then studying in the hollow, fluorescent hum of the 24-hour library until my eyes burned. One night, exhausted and trying to cram for a history final, I took a small break and glanced at my phone. A new photo from Simon had been posted online. It was him, smiling, holding a glass of red wine with the Roman Colosseum illuminated behind him. The caption read, "Finding my soul in the eternal city. So grateful to Mom and Dad for this life-changing study abroad experience. #blessed." My parents had paid for his entire 4-year education at a private liberal arts college, including the semester in Europe and, later, a master's degree in Renaissance art history, a degree he had yet to use for anything other than correcting people at dinner parties. When I had later, cautiously, asked them if they could possibly help with a small loan for a certification course in digital archiving, a course that came with a guaranteed job placement, my mother had sighed, a long, theatrical exhalation of regret. "Oh, Julian," she'd said, her voice a practiced symphony of pity, "we would love to, but we just don't have that kind of money to throw around. You know how much we've invested in Simon's future. Besides, you've always been so good at being independent. We're so proud of you for that." It was the most beautiful, most suffocating cage. They praised my independence while systematically ensuring I had no other choice. After the lawsuit papers arrived, I wandered through my new, empty house in a fog for 2 days. The unpacked boxes were silent accusers. Sleep was a stranger. The person I knew I needed to talk to wasn't a lawyer, not yet. It was the only person outside my family who had ever seemed to see me clearly, without the distorting lens of my brother's light, Alastair Finch. Alastair was a retired history professor who volunteered a few days a week at the archives. He was nearly 70, with a mind as sharp as a tack and a quiet, observant nature that I found deeply comforting. We had a standing lunch date on Tuesdays at a small cafe near the Historical Society, where we would talk about everything from Civil War battle strategies to the surprisingly vicious politics of local historical preservation. I called him on a Thursday morning, my voice a dry rasp. "Alastair, are you free for a coffee?" I need some advice. The old professor kind of advice. "You sound like you've been wrestling with ghosts, Julian. I'll meet you at the Daily Grind in 20 minutes. I slid the legal documents across the small, worn wooden table. Alastair put on his reading glasses, his expression shifting from gentle curiosity to a deep, furrowed disbelief, and finally, to a quiet, simmering indignation on my behalf. He read every single word, his untouched cappuccino growing cold. "Let me be certain I am understanding this correctly," he said at last, pushing the papers back toward me. "Your parents are claiming you owe them for the cost of your own childhood, and as remuneration, they are asking the court to compel you to sign your home over to your brother, for whom you will also be required to pay the mortgage for 2 years? I could only nod. A lump of grief and anger lodged in my throat. This is a work of profound fiction, he said, his voice low and steady. It is legally and morally bankrupt. A competent judge will see it for what it is. He leaned forward, his clear blue eyes locking onto mine. But Julian, baseless does not mean harmless. This is designed to wound you, to exhaust you financially and emotionally. This is not a lawsuit. It is a declaration of war. I know, I whispered. What do they truly want? The house, I said, the words tasting like poison. My father called me 2 days after I closed on it. He didn't say congratulations. He didn't ask to see it. He demanded it. The memory was burned into my mind. I had been in the sun-drenched living room, imagining where to put a bookshelf, when my phone had rung. It was my father. Julian, he'd said, his voice stripped of all warmth, a cold, formal tone I'd never heard before. Hi, Dad. You should see this place, I need you to do what's right, he interrupted, his voice like a hammer blow. Your brother needs that house. I had frozen, the sunlight feeling suddenly cold on my skin. What are you talking about? Simon is struggling, son. He is all that student debt. He can't get his feet under him. He needs a foundation. A man needs a foundation. The bitter irony of his words almost made me laugh. A foundation? Dad, I just spent 13 years building my own. This is my foundation. Don't be selfish, he snapped, his voice turning ugly. This is easy for you. You're meticulous with money. You can save up and buy another one. This is for your brother. For the family. For the first time in my life, I hadn't backed down. My voice was steady, though my heart was a frantic bird against my ribs. My name is on the deed, Dad. I saved the down payment. I pay the mortgage. It's my house. A long, cold silence stretched across the line. Then his voice dropped to a venomous whisper. You will regret this, Julian. Family is supposed to come first. He hung up. 2 days later, the lawsuit landed on my counter. Alistair listened to the entire story, his expression grim. So they are attempting to publicly humiliate you into surrendering the one significant thing you have ever claimed for yourself, so they can hand it to the son they have subsidized his entire life. That about sums it up, I said, stirring my cold coffee into a pointless vortex. Very well, Alistair said, his voice shifting into a more strategic tone. The first thing you must do is hire a formidable lawyer. They cost a great deal of money, Alistair. Every spare cent I have is tied up in this house. I understand, but you cannot face this alone. What if I did? The idea was a spark of madness, and it tumbled out of my mouth before I could stop it. What if I represented myself? Pro se. Who knows this story better than I do? Who has the evidence? I have every bank statement, every pay stub, every email where I asked for a pittance and was told no. It's all here. I tapped my temple and here. I gestured to the worn leather satchel I carried to work, my personal archive. Alistair stared at me for a long moment. I expected him to tell me it was a fool's errand, but instead, he gave a slow, considering nod. You are a digital archivist, Julian. You find the truth in faded, chaotic records. You follow the data trail. You document everything meticulously. Perhaps you can. But you will have to be 10 times more organized and 100 times more dispassionate than they are. He paused, a small, determined smile touching his lips. And if you choose this path, I will help you. I will be your unofficial, unpaid research assistant. We will build an unassailable case. For the first time in days, a sliver of light pierced the suffocating fog. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I had an ally. The thought was so new, so profoundly comforting, that it almost brought me to tears right there in the cafe. I sat up straighter, took a deep breath, and looked at Alistair. All right, I said, my voice firm. Let's do it. The walk back to the archives was different. The weight on my shoulders was still immense, but it was no longer a formless, crushing burden. It had a shape now, a structure. But I knew this was just the beginning. Alistair was right. My parents had declared war, and I was about to discover the shocking depths of their scorched earth strategy. The days that followed were a descent into a surreal world of legal documents and sleepless nights. The formal complaint arrived by courier, a thick sheaf of papers filled with accusations that painted me as a cold, monstrous caricature. It was all there in black and white, the $400,000 claim, calculated with a chilling, corporate-style absurdity. They had created an invoice for my existence, orthodontic work from 1998, $6,000, a week at summer camp in 2004, $950, a prorated share of every mortgage payment, every utility bill, every grocery receipt for 18 years. I sat at my new, empty dining table, spreading the documents out like a scholar examining ancient, poisoned texts. It was so clinical, so brutal. I felt a wave of physical nausea. How could they strip mine our shared history and reforge it into a weapon? My first instinct was to call my mother, to scream, to weep, to ask her how the woman who had taught me to tie my shoes could now be attempting to dismantle my life. But I didn't. Instead, I called the one person in my family who had always felt like a safe harbor, my grandfather. My grandfather, my father's father, was a retired carpenter named Henry. He was a man of few words, with strong, calloused hands that smelled perpetually of sawdust and quiet integrity. He picked up on the second ring. "Grandpa," I said, my voice tight. "Julian? You sound like you're carrying the world, son." I took a shaky breath and told him everything. I read him the numbers from the invoice, the accusations. I waited for him to express shock, perhaps to tell me there had been a terrible misunderstanding. But he was silent for a long time on the other end of the line. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy, freighted with a weariness that went far beyond his years. "I am so sorry, Julian. I am truly, deeply sorry," he said. "Your father, he has lost his way. And your mother is fanning the flames. I don't understand, Grandpa. How could they be so cruel?" Another pause, longer this time. "It isn't just them," he said, and a chill went down my spine. "Your grandmother and I received a call yesterday. From your Aunt Diana." Aunt Diana, my father's younger sister. She had always been a complicated figure in my life, cloyingly sweet to my face while always managing to pinch my cheek just a little too hard. I'd often catch her watching me with a strange, cool assessment in her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. "What about her?" I asked. "She was the one who planted this grotesque idea in their heads," my grandfather said, his voice laced with a rare and potent disgust. "She's the one who found them the lawyer. She's the one financing this abomination." The world seemed to tilt and spin. "What? Why would she do that?" "Jealousy, Julian. It's a rot. She has always felt that your father got the better deal in life, in love, in everything. She sees your success, this house you earned, your independence, and she resents it. She sees you, and she sees my son, and she's whispering poison in their ears, telling them they're owed something, that they're the victims here." It was a betrayal on an entirely new level. This wasn't just my parents' toxic favoritism. This was a coordinated attack, a family conspiracy. Just as that new, horrifying reality was sinking in, things got worse. Simon, my sunbeam brother, launched his own offensive on social media. It began with a photo of him standing in front of my cottage, a self-satisfied, contemplative look on his face. The caption, "Sometimes a place just feels like it's meant to be. Looking forward to putting down roots. #family #New Horizons." Then came the string of inspirational posts, photos of him looking wistfully out of cafe windows with captions like, "It's hard when your artistic soul craves stability in a world that doesn't value it. Thankful for family who always has your back." He never mentioned my name, but he didn't have to. The comment sections filled with a chorus of fawning relatives and confused friends. "So proud of you, Simon. You deserve all the good things." A hot, public shame washed over me. He was parading his sense of entitlement for the world to see, painting me as the villain in a story I never asked to be a part of. The phone calls began soon after. Uncles, cousins, family friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Most were calling to deliver a lecture. Your parents are good people, Julian. Family is all we have in this world. Your brother needs a helping hand. They had all been fed my parents' carefully curated, one-sided narrative. I was the selfish, hoarding son, callously watching my poor, deserving brother flounder. I spent an entire evening blocking numbers, my thumb jabbing at the screen with cold precision. I felt utterly isolated, an island fortress under siege. Just as I was about to turn my phone off for the night, it rang again with an unknown number. I almost declined, but some impulse made me answer. "Hello," I said, my voice flat with exhaustion. "Julian? It's your grandmother." My heart stuttered. My grandparents had been silent through all of this. I had feared the worst. "Grandma, your grandfather and we want you to know we are on your side, my dear," she said, her voice a beacon of warmth and sanity. "We know how hard you have worked for everything you have. We know what is right and what is wrong. And this is profoundly wrong." I could hear my grandfather's gruff voice in the background. "Tell him we're proud of him," he said, the words unmistakable. I leaned my forehead against the cool plaster of my kitchen wall and closed my eyes, tears I didn't know I was holding back finally streaming down my face. It wasn't just their support, it was validation. It was an anchor in a raging storm. Then my grandfather got on the line. "Listen to me, Julian," he said, his voice firm with conviction. "I have seen this kind of favoritism poison a family before. I saw what it did to good people. I did not speak up then. I will not make that mistake again. You fight this. Do you hear me? You fight." His words struck me with the force of a physical blow. I have seen this before. There was a history here, a deeper, darker current I'd never been aware of. This wasn't just about me and Simon anymore. This was about a pattern, a generational sickness that needed to be broken. After I hung up the phone, I walked into the small spare room I'd designated as my home office. I looked at the piles of evidence I had been collecting, the bank statements showing 13 years of meticulous saving, the pay stubs from my teenage jobs, the emails where my parents had explicitly stated they couldn't help with my education because of Simon's expenses. It was all there, a perfect, undeniable data trail of my life. I considered, for a moment, hiring a lawyer, handing my story over to a stranger, and letting them fight for me. But my grandfather's words echoed in my head. You fight this. This wasn't just a legal case anymore. This was my life, my story, and I was the only one who could tell it. I called Alistair. I'm not hiring a lawyer, I said, my voice steady and clear. Julian. He began, a note of caution in his voice. I'm doing it myself, Alistair. I have to. They have twisted my life into a work of fiction. I am going to be the one to write the ending. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him weighing the monumental risk, the sheer audacity of my decision. All right, David, he said finally, a hint of admiration in his voice, referencing the biblical story. Let's go slay a giant. The weeks leading up to the preliminary hearing were the most intense of my life. My quiet cottage became a war room. Alistair came over most evenings after his volunteer shift at the archives. We'd order cheap takeout. The irony of me still eating like a starving student in my own home was not lost on me, and spread my life out across the dining room floor. My evidence was no longer just a pile of paper. It became a structured, irrefutable narrative. We organized everything into binders with color-coded tabs: financial self-sufficiency, documented parental support for Simon, declined requests for aid, the home purchase. Alistair, with his historian's mind and professor's rigor, was relentless. This pay stub from the diner is good, he'd say, circling a date. It shows you were working at 17. But what's better? The bank statement from that same month showing a deposit for the exact amount and another line item showing the check you wrote to the DMV for your car insurance. We connect the dots. We leave no room for interpretation. He taught me how to think like a lawyer, but to speak like an archivist. Be concise. Stick to the verifiable facts. Let the documents speak for themselves. Do not get emotional. That last part was the hardest. Every piece of paper held a memory, a small sting of injustice. But I learned to channel the hurt into cold, methodical preparation. About a week before the hearing, an email arrived. It was from my parents' lawyer. Attached was a formal settlement offer. My heart hammered against my ribs as I opened it. It was a document of breathtaking arrogance. The offer was this: if I agreed to voluntarily sign the house over to Simon, my parents would generously agree to drop the lawsuit for the $400,000. It was framed as an act of mercy, a final chance for me to make things right with the family before the ugliness of a public court battle. I forwarded it to Alistair. His reply was immediate. Delete it. Do not respond. It is a classic intimidation tactic. They are testing your resolve, seeing if you will flinch. It is also a trap. Any response, even a simple refusal, can be twisted and used against you. Ignore it completely. But the offer did something else. It planted a seed of an idea, a risky, dangerous idea. They are trying to intimidate me, I said to Alistair on the phone that night. They believe I am scared and isolated. What if I use their overconfidence against them? What are you thinking, Julian? He asked, his voice cautious. They want to talk? Let's talk, I said. I will call them. I will tell them I am considering their offer. I'll ask for one last meeting, just me and them at my house, to talk things through before the lawyers become even more involved. Julian, that is a minefield. They will only use it as an opportunity to manipulate you. I know, I said, my voice low. That is exactly what I'm counting on. It was the most terrifying phone call I have ever made. I dialed my mother's number, my hand shaking so slightly that I had to steady it on the countertop. She answered, her voice cold and brittle. What do you want, Julian? I took a deep breath, marshalling all my strength to keep my voice even. I received the offer from your lawyer, I said. I think we should talk. Just the three of us. Here, at the house. Before this goes any further. I could hear her muffled whisper to my father in the background. Then she came back on the line, a clear note of triumph in her voice. Fine. We will be there tomorrow evening at 7. The next evening, I prepared the scene. I set a plate of store-bought cookies on the coffee table, a pathetic prop in my domestic drama. I made sure my phone was fully charged, and I activated a simple voice recording app, one that would run silently in the background with the screen dark. In my state, it was legal to record a conversation as long as one party, in this case, me, consented. This wasn't entrapment. It was insurance. It was an archivist's tool for preserving the truth. They arrived precisely at 7. They walked into my house, as if they were inspectors, their eyes scanning for flaws. They didn't comment on the polished floors or the sunlight streaming through the clean windows. They looked only at me, their faces a carefully composed mask of pity and resolve, like surgeons about to perform a painful but necessary amputation. Julian, my father began, seating himself on the edge of my new sofa without invitation, we are glad you have come to your senses. This has been terribly difficult for all of us. I haven't come to any senses, I said calmly. I wanted to understand. I wanted to hear it from you directly. Why are you doing this? My mother sighed, the sound of a long-suffering martyr. We are doing this for you, don't you see? We are trying to teach you the meaning of family. Simon is your brother. He needs this stability. You have always managed so well on your own. So, because I have managed, I am the one who must give up everything I've worked for? It is not everything, my father boomed, his face flushing. It is a house. A material object. You can get another one. This is about what is right. I leaned forward, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I kept my voice low, almost a whisper. So, the lawsuit, the $400,000, That's all real? You truly believe I owe you that money?" My mother scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. And then she spoke the words I had been waiting for, the words that would change everything. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Julian, don't be so dramatic. Of course we know a judge isn't actually going to give us the house or make you pay that ridiculous amount. Our lawyer made that very clear from the beginning." I held my breath, my thumb resting on the side of my phone in my pocket. "Then why?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Why do all this?" She looked me dead in the eye, her expression stripped of all pretense, revealing the cold, hard machinery beneath. "Because this is the only way," she said, her voice dropping with a venomous clarity. "It's a ploy. It's a strategy to put public and private pressure on you. To make you do the right thing and give the house to your brother without a big, ugly, expensive fight. It's to make you finally understand your place in this family." My father nodded his solemn agreement. "A public embarrassment," he added, "is a small price to pay for family loyalty." Click. I had it. The truth, perfectly preserved. A strange, icy calm washed over me. The hurt, the anger, it was all still there, but it was now encased in a protective layer of pure, cold purpose. I had what I needed. I stood up. "Thank you for coming," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "I believe this conversation is over." They looked at me, confused by my sudden dismissal. They thought they had won. They thought their pressure campaign was on the verge of success. As they walked out the door, my mother patted my arm, a gesture of patronizing affection. "You're doing the right thing, dear," she whispered. I didn't say a word. I just closed the door behind them, turned the deadbolt, and leaned against the solid wood, my body finally beginning to tremble. I pulled my phone from my pocket and looked at the small digital file. It was just a few megabytes of data, but it was the most powerful weapon I had ever possessed. It was the truth. The day of the hearing arrived on a cold, slate-gray morning. I walked into the county courthouse, my worn leather satchel feeling heavier than ever. It didn't just contain binders of paper, it contained the curated evidence of my life for the past 16 years. I saw them across the grand, echoing lobby, my parents and Simon. They were dressed in somber, expensive-looking clothes, a theatrical performance of respectability and grief. My father wore a stiff blazer, my mother a dark dress with a single string of pearls. Simon fidgeted in a suit that looked a size too large for him. They were a tableau of sorrowful parents, forced into this terrible position by their callous son. They huddled together with a man in a slick, tailored suit who could only be their lawyer. They glanced at me, then quickly looked away, their performance pitch-perfect. Alistair had insisted on coming. He couldn't sit with me at the defendant's table, but he gave my shoulder a firm squeeze before taking a seat in the public gallery. "Just the facts, Julian," he whispered. "Stick to the archive. You have this." We were called into the courtroom. It was smaller and more austere than I had imagined, all polished dark wood and an air of stern efficiency. A woman with a kind face, the court clerk, informed us that Judge Isabella Rossi would be presiding. I sat at my table alone and arranged my binders. My hands were damp, but my mind was surprisingly, unnervingly clear. The fear was a low hum beneath the surface, but the anger had solidified into a cold, hard stone in my gut, giving me an unfamiliar strength. Judge Rossi entered. She was a woman in her late 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes and an expression that communicated she had seen every form of human folly and was not easily impressed. The hearing began. My parents' lawyer went first. He was a master storyteller. He spoke of my parents' boundless love, their endless sacrifices. He projected childhood photos onto a screen, me on a tricycle, me at a birthday party, smiling gap-toothed at the camera. "These are the parents who gave this young man everything," he said, his voice rich with pathos. "And now, in their time of need, with one son, a gifted artist, struggling beneath a mountain of student debt, the other, a successful professional, refuses to help." He refuses to acknowledge the debt he owes them, not just the financial debt, Your Honor, but the profound moral debt. He presented their invoice, the itemized list of my childhood costs. Judge Rossi glanced at it, her face a perfect, unreadable mask. He then called Simon to the stand as a character witness. Simon spoke in a soft, rehearsed voice about his struggles as a freelance cultural historian, how the financial instability was crippling his creative soul, how all he ever wanted was a stable home from which to contribute his gifts to the world. It was a compelling performance. I could feel the eyes of the few people in the gallery on me, their gazes heavy with judgment. Then it was my turn. Mr. Croft, Judge Rossi said, her gaze fixing on me, you are representing yourself? Yes, Your Honor, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. The floor is yours. I stood and walked to the lectern. I did not look at my parents or my brother. I looked directly at the judge. Your Honor, I began, the plaintiff's counsel has told a very moving story. The only problem is that it is a work of fiction. I am an archivist. My purpose here today is not to tell a story, but to present the factual record. For the next 20 minutes, I systematically dismantled their narrative, not with emotion, but with data. Counsel stated that my parents gave me everything. Exhibit A is my bank statement from August of 2004, showing my first deposit from my first job at the Salty Dog Diner. Exhibit B is the bill of sale for a 1993 Ford Escort, which I purchased myself for $900. Exhibit C is a complete record of every tuition payment I made to Port Blossom Community College. I continued, my voice gaining confidence with every document I presented. The emails where I had asked for a small loan for my professional certification and was denied due to the expense of Simon's master's degree. I presented the mortgage documents for my home, showing a 20% down payment saved entirely by me from my own salary. Judge Rossi listened intently, her pen scratching notes on a legal pad. The courtroom was utterly silent. My parents' lawyer was beginning to look less slick and more agitated. Finally, I was done presenting my evidence. Your Honor, I said, I have no further documents to present at this time. However, I would like to call my mother, Helen Croft, to the stand for questioning. A faint murmur rippled through the gallery. My mother shot a panicked look at her lawyer. He whispered something to her, and she reluctantly made her way to the witness box. I approached her. My heart was a drum against my ribs, but I kept my voice level. Mom, I said, and the word felt like a foreign object in my mouth. You stated in your complaint that you are suing me to recoup the costs of raising me. Is that correct? Yes, she said, her hand fluttering to the pearls at her neck. We just want what is fair and right. And you believe that I owe you this house? We believe Simon deserves it. We believe you should do the right thing for your brother, for your family. She was defaulting to her script. I took a deep breath. This was the moment. Mom, isn't it true that this entire lawsuit, the $400,000 claim, the demand for my home, was never actually about getting those things in a court of law? Her lawyer shot to his feet. Objection. Leading the witness. Sustained, the judge said, her eyes not leaving my mother's face. Rephrase, Mr. Croft. I nodded. Let me ask you this then. On the evening of October 12th, at my home, did you have a conversation with me regarding this lawsuit? She shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Yes, we came to try and talk some sense into you. And in that conversation, I said, my voice dropping, did you state to me that you knew a judge would not actually grant you the house or the money? Panic, pure and undiluted, flashed in her eyes. I don't recall saying that specifically. You don't recall? I pressed gently. You don't recall admitting that this lawsuit was, and I am quoting here, a ploy to put pressure on me? No, I never said that. That is a lie, she cried out, her voice shrill, her eyes darting desperately toward the judge. I let her denial hang in the dead silent room. I looked at her, then at my father, whose face had gone ashen. I looked at Simon, who was staring intently at his own hands. Then I turned to the judge. Your Honor, I said, my voice ringing with a terrible, quiet clarity. I have a recording of that conversation. You could have heard a tear fall. The air was sucked from the room. My mother's face crumpled. Her lawyer was on his feet again, sputtering, objection. Your Honor, objection. Improperly obtained evidence. This is outrageous. But Judge Rossi wasn't looking at him. Her eyes, sharp as obsidian shards, were locked on my mother. She held up a hand, silencing the lawyer with a single, sharp gesture. Mrs. Croft, the judge said, her voice dangerously quiet, I am going to ask you one more time, and I strongly advise you to remember that you are under oath. Did you or did you not tell your son that this lawsuit was a ploy? My mother stared at the judge, her bravado and theatrical grief stripped away, leaving only a small, terrified, and cornered woman. The pearls, the expensive dress, the performance of aggrieved motherhood, it all melted away. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked to my father for help, but he refused to meet her gaze. Finally, she broke. A single, ragged sob escaped her lips, and she whispered, yes. That one word was a death knell. Judge Rossi leaned back in her high-backed chair, a look of profound and undisguised disgust on her face. She looked from my parents to their lawyer. This is one of the most egregious, malicious, and cynical abuses of the judicial process that I have ever had the misfortune to witness, she said, her voice like steel. You have filed a frivolous and vexatious lawsuit. You have committed perjury. You have attempted to use this court as a cudgel for familial extortion. She turned her gaze to me, and for a fleeting moment, her expression softened. Mr. Croft, you have conducted yourself with more integrity and professionalism than the actual member of the bar present at the plaintiff's table. Then her face hardened again as she brought down her gavel. The sound cracked through the silent room like a rifle shot. Case dismissed with prejudice, she boomed. And I am referring this matter to the State Bar for a full review of counsel's conduct. We are done here. It was over. I had won. I stood there, my hands gripping the lectern to keep them from shaking. I looked over at my family. Their faces were a canvas of raw, unfiltered humiliation. They had gambled everything on my submission, and they had lost in the most public and damning way imaginable. In that moment, they weren't my parents or my brother. They were just strangers on the other side of a war I never wanted to fight but was forced to win. The weeks that followed were a study in the frantic death throes of a narrative that had been publicly executed. Aunt Diana began a campaign of unhinged, rambling voicemails. You think you're so clever, don't you? One of them slurred, the words thick with cheap wine. You humiliated your own mother in public. You tore this family apart. You'll end up old and alone in that house, Julian. You'll see. Simon's approach was more modern. He launched a GoFundMe page titled, Help an Artist Rebuild After Family Betrayal. The photo was a black and white selfie of him looking forlornly out a window. The story he wove was a masterpiece of fiction, claiming his financially powerful older brother had used complex legal trickery to steal his inheritance and destroy his future. He was asking for $50,000. The anger I felt was a white-hot flare, but Alistair's calm voice on the phone was a firebreak. Document it, he said simply. Screenshot the page. Save the voicemails. This is no longer just pathetic, Julian. It's harassment and libel. So, I did what I do best. I created a new archive. I titled the binder, The Aftermath. Aunt Diana escalated from voicemails to slow, late-night drive-bys, her car idling across the street from my cottage. It was a transparent, clumsy attempt to intimidate me, to make me feel unsafe in the very sanctuary I had fought so hard to protect. Armed with this new file, the screenshots of the fraudulent GoFundMe, the saved voicemails, and a log of my aunt's visits captured by the new security camera I'd installed, I went back to the courthouse. This time, I was not a defendant. I was a petitioner. The restraining order against my aunt was granted without hesitation. The GoFundMe was taken down after I filed a detailed fraud report, complete with a link to the public court records dismissing my family's case. It had only raised $75. The final piece of the old world fell away about a week later. My father called. His voice was different. The booming authority was gone, replaced by a strained, hollow sound. "Julian," he said, "your aunt is beside herself. A restraining order against your own flesh and blood." I stood in my kitchen, looking out the window at the small yard where green shoots were finally beginning to push through the soil. I felt a strange and profound emptiness, not a painful void, but a clean, quiet space. The anger was gone. The hurt was a dull, distant ache, like a phantom limb. All that remained was a sad, crystalline clarity. "She was harassing me, Dad," I said, my voice calm. "Actions have consequences. This has to stop," he pleaded. "This is tearing everyone apart. Your mother hasn't stopped crying. Simon won't leave his room." "This isn't about me anymore," I said, and the words felt truer than anything I had ever spoken. "This is about all of you. You built this. You have to live in it." "What do you want from us, Julian?" he asked, his voice cracking with a desperation I had never heard from him. "What will it take to fix this?" I thought about it for a long moment. What did I want? An apology? Money? Revenge? I realized with a sudden jolt that I didn't want any of it. What I wanted was something they could never give me, a different past, a family that wasn't fundamentally broken. Since that was impossible, there was only one other thing I needed. Peace. "I don't want anything from you," I said, my voice quiet but firm as bedrock. "I just want you to leave me alone. Don't call me. Don't come here. Let me live my life. The one I built. The one you tried to take." "But we're your family," he whispered, a last, desperate grasp at the old power structure. I took a deep breath. It was time to set the final boundary, to make the final, clean cut. "You were my family," I corrected him gently. "But you stopped acting like it a long time ago." "I'm not the one who broke this, Dad. I'm just the one who finally turned on the lights." I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end, then a profound silence. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't need one. I ended the call and blocked his number. Then I blocked my mother's. Then Simon's. It was a strange, clean, liberating feeling. With each tap of the screen, I was building a wall, not a wall to keep the world out, but a firewall to keep the poison from getting back in. For the first time since that certified letter had arrived, my cottage felt truly my own. It felt safe. It felt like home. It has been over a year now since that day in court. My life is quiet, and I have learned that quiet is a beautiful, underrated thing. It's not the empty, lonely quiet of my past, but a peaceful, layered quiet, filled with the gentle snores of a one-eared rescue dog named Rocky and the lingering smell of sawdust. The workshop I had always dreamed of in my garage is now a reality. It is my sanctuary within a sanctuary. It's where I go to think, to create, to turn rough, jagged pieces of wood into something smooth, useful, and beautiful. My grandfather visits every Saturday. He taught me woodworking. He was a patient teacher, showing me how to read the story in a piece of oak, how to feel the balance of a hand plane, how to have the patience to sand a piece of cherry until it felt like silk. We didn't talk much about what had happened with my parents. We didn't need to. The quiet work, the shared act of creation, was its own language, its own therapy. We were building things, not breaking them. One Saturday, he told me a story. We were finishing a small bookshelf. "You know," he said, running his calloused hand over the wood, "you remind me of my brother, Michael." He told me how his mother, my great-grandmother, had a favorite. It was him. His brother, Michael, was the shadow, the afterthought. When their father died, my grandfather, the golden boy, inherited the lion's share of the family farm. I was young and arrogant, and I was silent, he said, his voice thick with ancient regret. I stood by and watched my mother push my own brother away because it benefited me, and I have regretted that silence every single day for 50 years. When your father started doing the same thing with you and Simon, I saw my mother in him. And I saw my brother in you. He put a heavy, comforting hand on my shoulder. I couldn't fix what I broke back then, but I swore to God I wouldn't stay silent again. You didn't just win a house, Julian. You broke a cycle. You have no idea how proud I am of you. I finally understood. His unwavering support wasn't just about me, it was an act of atonement, of restoration. It was the greatest gift I have ever received. The healing isn't a straight line. One evening a few months ago, my mother called from a number I didn't recognize. Her voice was a litany of self-pity. "You've poisoned your father against Simon," she wept. "You broke our family." The old Julian would have felt a pang of guilt. But the old Julian was gone, plain, smooth, and finished with a tougher varnish. "No, Mom," I said, my voice quiet but as solid as the oak workbench we had built. "You broke it. It was broken a long time ago." I just turned on the lights. I ended the call. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I just felt free. My life is built now, not on a foundation of earth and concrete, but on a foundation of choice. My real family is a 75-year-old man who taught me that the opposite of breaking is not fixing, but building. It's a cynical retired professor who showed me the meaning of loyalty. It's a one-eared dog who reminds me every day that a fractured past doesn't preclude a joyful future. It's the friends who gather around the solid, handcrafted dining table that my grandfather and I built together, filling my small cottage with laughter. Building a life, I've learned, is a lot like woodworking. You start with the raw material you're given. Some parts are strong, some are weak, some are knotted and twisted with old wounds. You can't change the nature of the wood, but you can choose what to do with it. You have to be brave enough to cut away the rot, the parts that are weak and toxic. It's a painful process. It leaves gaps and holes, but it's the only way to get to the strong, healthy grain underneath. Then, with patience and care, you sand down the rough edges, you join the good pieces together, and you build something new. Something that is yours. Something that can support you. Something beautiful.